Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to our Team Tuesday this week with Nilesh Makan. Hi Nilesh, welcome back.
Thank you for having me back.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure. So Nilesh, on Tuesdays we talk about teams, but before we dive into that, share with us, what's the book that most inspired you in your career as a Scrum Master?
For me, I think the book that most inspired me was by Satya Nadella, his book called Hit Refresh. And the reason it inspired me was that I think Satya Nadella was really able to take a very monolithic company such as Microsoft and change its culture at the roots, right? And he did that through empathetic and mindful leadership. And he was able to turn that company around. And I think he did that focusing on true agility, which really starts with people, dialogue, and really understanding each other, right? And what he did was he shifted the conversations and he brought more human-centered development and design to Microsoft. He kind of made things about people and not about business per se. And I think for me, that was the fundamental shift that was needed to create an organization of the future and how people find meaning in their work. And he did that through really a lot of listening, asking the right questions, empowering others, and dealing with change that was coming in at all levels, right? So whether it was transformative technologies such as quantum computing, AI, 4D printing, VR and AR through the HoloLens, he really considered how organizations and societies can and must transform. So for me, that was a really inspiring book that really shifted my perspective around how do you transform businesses to drive more agility.
Yeah, absolutely. And also comes back to the theme that we had yesterday in your intro, right? Like this holistic thinking about business and not just the one thing that we need to do.
Absolutely.
All right. So now we turn our attention to teams, which are, of course, the key aspect, the key productive aspect of technology businesses all over the world, taking the focus of people first, as you just mentioned from Nadella's book. Let's focus on how teams sometimes self-destroy. So tell us a story of a team that you were working with and walk us through the steps, like how this small little behaviors or hints started to develop over time and then became problems. Tell us that story, how they developed over time.
So I think the story for me that is most prominent, and it's quite a lovely story. So we had a team, that had just been formed, and it was a team that was called the Center for Excellence, and our vision was to really drive enterprise agility across the organization. And we had reported to a particular leader, and unfortunately, that leader fell ill with cancer, and it's not really nice, but that leader needed to take some time off and deal with his family and spirituality, and really we didn't necessarily have anyone that we reported into, and that team was a completely autonomous team, right? There was no direct report. We had full autonomy to do what we needed to do. And I remember the motivation levels in that team. It was incredible. People were driven, they were running around, they were talking, they were conversing, they were understanding of what the challenges were, and they were dealing with those challenges. And then, after several months, there was a little bit of a restructure in the organization, and we had to go to a different leader. And the first thing that this leader changed was the vision. And there was a very much direct focus to say, you will do this, rather than...
So it was kind of dictating the vision rather than changing with you.
Right. And I think for me, that was a really self-destroying pattern.
What started happening? So I can imagine, the whole team gets called into a room. The new leader is doing the usual introduction and just slips into the conversation that your new vision is this. And I expect you to report every week on these metrics, I'm guessing. What happened?
Yeah, absolutely right. So the first thing that happens is the pushback, right? It's not from the entire team, which I think that's where the challenge is, because I think in systems thinking, they talk about this notion of a shared vision. A shared vision is one of the fundamental premises of systemic thinking. So when you don't have a shared vision, the conversations start moving towards a more deliberating and destroying conversation. like, no, we must do this because this is what the manager said, or we must do this because this is the way it's done, or we must do this. It isn't saying, what do we want to achieve? What is the intent behind it? And then there's concessions that need to be made, right? So some people in the team that have a certain idea about what a vision should be will say, nah, I'm not really happy with this vision, but I'll just accept it. And then, there's this acceptance of something that is not altruistic in nature, that isn't purposeful in nature, that isn't achieving what it needs to achieve. And overall, it just degrades the conversation, it degrades the vision, it degrades the intent behind what's being done. So for me, I think a shared vision is absolutely important. It needs to be bottom up as far as possible. It needs to be shared, and it needs to be bought in by everyone. Otherwise, you're just going to have team dynamics that just don't work effectively.
Absolutely. So one of the things that came to my mind is when you said the pushback was there, but it was not from all the team. It came to my mind immediately that maybe what happened was that the team already had different ideas of what the vision should be, but those ideas had not been discussed openly. The team had not come to an agreement, after debating or evaluating or whatever. Is that how you saw it at the time?
I think the original vision was quite clear and I think articulated well and bought in quite well from the team. And that's where the momentum was, that's where the passion was, that's where the intent was. But when the vision changed and it was made where the change focused, and the way I think about it is if you think about shooting a rocket to the moon. So Elon Musk's now got a rocket, right? Or let's even say Mars. Even better, right? Mars is really far away. If you don't get that vision right, if you don't understand that we want to be a multi-planetary species and not everyone is focused and aligned on trying to achieve that, and the small steps are okay, right? Like, so I love the way Elon Musk thinks about agility. And in SpaceX, what they do is he first built a rocket that went up and exploded, right? And we talked about failure, and that's failure, right? The rocket exploded. It did not work. But there was learning that happened through that process. Your confidence level increases because you're leveraging data. And then it happens again. And then, he launches a second rocket, it explodes, third rocket explodes. And then eventually, he had just a little bit of funds left and he managed to scrape up a little bit more because his confidence level rose to such an extent that he was probably 80 to 90% confident that it would be successful. So he scrambled and got a little bit of extra funds. He launched the rocket and it was successful. And then what happened was that he used the Falcon to kind of start generating revenue. And he would use the revenue from the Falcon to build the Falcon Heavy. And then he used the Falcon Heavy to build the Dragon capsule. And then he built the Starship. So the vision still remains clear that we want to go to Mars and we want to be a multidisciplinary species, right? A multi-planetary species. But the point is that you don't start by building a starship. You start by trying small and iterating towards that vision. And if you get that vision wrong and you shoot for Mars, but you aim and you hit the moon, that's not ultimately reaching your vision, right? And you're changing direction. You're changing direction to what an ultimate vision is, to something that is different. And if not everyone has bought into that vision of moving to the moon rather than moving to Mars, you don't have that congruence within a team.
Yeah, absolutely. And that congruence is, as you mentioned a moment ago, kind of an amplifier of motivation and drive for the team. Thank you for sharing that, Nilesh.
Pleasure.
Tuesday is Team Day here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. But tomorrow we talk about something that goes beyond the work we do with the teams. We will talk about how to lead change and what our guests have learned from leading and participating in change programs during their career. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.